Jury has spent 3 days weighing whether Heard defamed Depp when she wrote in a 2018 op-ed in the Washington Post describing herself as a public figure representing domestic abuse. She did not name Depp in that article, but he claims the implication was clear and that the op-ed damaged his career. He is suing her for $50 million. He also denies ever being physically violent toward Heard. On the other side, Amber Heard filed a countersuit for $100 million. She accuses Depp of defaming her via his lawyer in statements that were made in the Daily Mail. It's a 6-week trial. The jury has been deliberating about 13 hours over the course of 3 days at the courthouse in Fairfax, Virginia. We've seen crowds. We've seen high interest, live feeds of the trial, having over 1 million viewers at any one time. You can see Johnny Depp, one of his arrivals over the course of this trial. We've got a peek inside the courtroom now. Amber Heard has made her way to listen to this verdict. Johnny Depp left the courtroom after closing arguments last week and is not expected to attend. So with that, we turn to Miguel Almaguer, who's been covering the case for us. And Miguel, the jurors have quite a few decisions to make. There's a counterclaim, there's the primary claim, and there's several subsections of questions underneath on this verdict form. So it's not an easy case.
That's right, Savannah. Because there's all those options, the verdict could go several different ways. It could also be a mixed verdict. First, they'll decide whether Johnny Depp defamed Amber Heard, and if Amber Heard defamed Johnny Depp, then they'll have to decide on punitive damages. As you mentioned, Johnny Depp is suing for $50 million. Amber Heard is suing for $100 million. They could decide several different ways. They will actually pick the dollar amount, the punitive damages that the other person will have to pay. So those numbers could certainly be skewed. As you mentioned, they had a lot to go through. This trial lasted 6 weeks. There was more than 100 hours of testimony. Dozens of witnesses, including celebrities like Johnny Depp's ex-girlfriend Kate Moss, took the stand. This was a very sordid, salacious trial where we certainly saw the dirty laundry of a very private marriage gone very public. There was abuse allegations. There was mental abuse allegations, physical abuse, and we also saw many text messages in courts. We saw photos and voice recorded memos in this case. All of their dirty laundry certainly on display for the world to see here. Of course, as you mentioned, at the center of this case is that 2018 op-ed in which Amber Heard said she was a public figure representing domestic abuse. That spurred Johnny Depp's lawsuit and then Amber Heard's countersuit. Both say they lost their careers over this. There's been large crowds outside the courtroom for weeks, many of them pro Johnny Depp, cheering him as he arrived and left the courthouse every day, and jeering Amber Heard, booing her wildly as she left and also arrived every day. We haven't seen that type of audience here today, likely because, as you mentioned, we're told Johnny Depp is watching this trial from the UK, where he's been performing as a musician for the last several days. But we do expect that verdict very soon, Savannah.
All right, all eyes on the courtroom in Fairfax, Virginia court. The case filed there because the Washington Post has a printing press in Virginia, and neither Amber Heard nor Johnny Depp resides there, but have for the last 6 weeks during this trial. And as we see, it's been quite the spectacle, both in person outside the courthouse and online, as millions have tuned in to watch this at times quite salacious testimony. I want to turn to NBC News legal analyst Danny Savalos, who's here. Danny, this case really got into it. We had the audio recordings, we had the pictures, but at the center of this is a legal issue. Whether or not Amber Heard defamed Johnny Depp, whether or not Johnny Depp defamed Amber Heard. And in both cases, they're public figures, which makes that case even harder to prove. Can you explain that?
There was a lot of evidence in this case. Some of it stretched the boundaries of relevance, but at its core, boiled down, these were two competing defamation cases. In other words, each party alleged that the other made a statement, a false statement, about the plaintiff on each side that caused damages. And that's what this jury has to sift through. Whether or not Amber Heard's statement in the Washington Post was about Johnny Depp, was defamatory, was it false? And then if so, if all those elements are met and Johnny Depp has the burden, Amber Heard has the burden on her counterclaims, then essentially damages are presumed and they have to write in and figure out a dollar amount, which, if they have found somebody liable, is going to be no easy task. There really wasn't a whole lot of evidence in this case about what the damages would be. Of course, it's entirely possible that the jury has concluded that each side gets zero. So lots of possibilities here for this jury on what is a more complicated than normal special jury verdict form.
Danny, let's listen in. I believe the judge has just entered the courtroom, or the jury.
All right. Just for everybody in the gallery, a reminder that this is a court of law, and regardless of the verdict, I will not tolerate any outbursts whatsoever. Okay? Thank you.
As the jury enters, the clerk will, by practice, usually hand the verdict to the judge who reads it and then hands it off to a clerk to read. In this case, it could be quite lengthy, as there are 3 alleged defamatory statements in terms of Johnny Depp's lawsuit, and on the other side, several defamatory statements as well. So there could be some time. And for each of those alleged defamatory statements, there are several elements the jury had to find. So it could be a lengthy reading of the verdict. We'll see. Let's listen in.
If I could have the attorney's approach for a moment. All right, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, what I need you to do, I need to give the forms back to you. When you find for a defamatory statement, 1 or more, you need to fill out the compensatory damages. It has to be at least $1 for compensatory damages and up to whatever you feel the damages should be. And for punitive damages, you can put a 0 there, or you can fill out that as well, but I need those lines filled out, okay? All right, so if I can have you retire back to the deliberation room and do that for me, okay?
Okay, Judge Azcarate has just admonished the jury that they need to fill out what the amount of damages would be if they have found defamatory statements. The clear implication is they have found defamation as to at least one of the statements.
So we hear back from them.
Because if they had not, there would not be the question of damages. Let's turn to legal analyst Kristen Gibbons-Fedden. She's practiced and focused on victims of sexual abuse and assault. She previously served as a prosecutor in the Bill Cosby retrial. So you're watching this with us, Kristen, and it's interesting because I think we did get a bit of a hint there. Do you agree that if the judge is sending them back to say you got to fill out something with regard to damages, that means in one aspect of the case, whether it's Johnny Depp's lawsuit or Amber Heard's lawsuit, they have found someone was defamed?
That's exactly right. Because the way that the jury verdict kind of flows is that if they answer yes to certain questions, then they can go on to the second question. Well, in order to even get to the compensatory damages question, they had to kind of answer yes to several questions, specifically regarding liability. And what does liability mean? Well, it means that they have most likely found that at least one of the statements, whether against Heard or whether against Depp, were defamatory. And so there has to be something. What I can only anticipate or think is that they put 0. They found liability. They found that the statement or statements were defamatory, but they said no damages. But the judge admonished them, as you mentioned, and told them to go back and actually put down a figure.
That's so interesting. Let me turn to another attorney, an entertainment attorney, Mitra Ahurian, who's perfect on this topic because the question is damages. I'm looking at the verdict form that the jurors have, and if they answered yes as to the first questions, whether or not these statements were in fact defamatory, then and only then are they asked to fill out the form and say how much compensatory damages and how much damage in terms of punitive damages. So compensatory damages are for the harm, the loss that you suffered in terms terms of lost wages, that kind of thing, punitive damages to send a message. So if they left that blank, it is possible, Mitra, that they either A, as Kristen suggested, put zero or didn't fill it out at all, or B, that they didn't figure out the question, in which case we could be here a while longer, no?
Yeah, that's exactly right. The interesting question is whether that number is zero or not. And I, to be honest, am very surprised that there was a finding of defamation, which, again, if we can assume that one way or the other. But the very interesting thing about this hint, so to speak, is that we really don't know which side, since we do have that countersuit. So, and you alluded to the fact that the damages portion, even if it was zero or a figure would be very hard to reach in a case like this, because the witnesses that were and experts that were speaking to the damages were not clear, and the numbers that they came up with were very speculative, and their analysis even canceled one another out to some degree. So if I were a jury trying to figure out damages, if it was going to be something beyond zero, I would have trouble. So we may be here a while if they're trying to come up with an actual number.
Yeah, let me turn to Danny Savalos on that, because you hinted about that before we even went to the courtroom live, that there hadn't been exhaustive testimony about the level of damages here. And one reason is because both sides say this really isn't about the money. This is about clearing Johnny Depp's good name, according to his lawyers, for Amber Heard. It's the same, it has the same motivation. And they kind of threw these numbers up, they're pie in the sky numbers. $50 million is what Johnny Depp is asking for. Her counterclaim asks for $100 million. So what do you make of what we just heard in terms of the jurors not having filled out or perhaps written down zero on the damages portion of the verdict sheet?
There are a couple inferences we can draw right now. First, we can assume, I think, that the jury just didn't forget to fill out this form. I'm looking at the special verdict form right now, and it clearly states that if you find defamation, the next thing you have to do is enter first compensatory damages, and then below that is punitive damages. So let's assume for now they didn't just oversight, it wasn't a mistake and they forgot to do it. If that's the case, they shouldn't be back in that jury room for very long at all. If they meant to send a message with nothing or a zero, then they may come back and award $5. But, because we're in civil court, a finding of defamation, a finding of liability, and an award of $0 is really the same as a defense verdict. It has the same net outcome. We're not in criminal court. Nobody's going to get a criminal record. So this may be a case where the jury is saying a pox on both your houses if they're finding defamation on both sides and awarding $0. But we don't know that yet. It's entirely possible that this is only a problem as to one of the parties, and they've found defamation and awarded significant damages or rendered a defense verdict for the other party. We don't know which party for whom they didn't fill out the form. But I expect, going to find out pretty quickly, because if it was just a mistake of putting in zero, then they can go back in there and award $1, $5, or some other nominal sum.
Just to be really clear, Danny, do you know whether in Virginia law a jury can award zero? I mean, this is getting down to the nitty-gritty, but if they had just left it blank, that would not be acceptable for the judge. If they had written in zero, would that be an acceptable verdict in terms of damages, or does the law require them to award some nominal amount?
The jury was instructed in the jury instructions that there was a presumption of damages if they find defamation. But my memory, and going back what we just saw, I seem to think the judge said the word blank. I could be wrong. We'll have to go back and look at the transcript. But I'm not aware that there is any rule that requires an amount of $1 or above. I expect there would have been an instruction to that effect, and I don't see that in the jury instructions. However, I mean, if they did write zero, then technically that's not really an award of damages. But again, I go back to, I think they might have left it blank, and in doing so, I'm inferring that they may have been sending a message, finding defamation, and then just leaving it blank. Because when you look at that special verdict form, you can't miss this page. This is not something that you would be flipping through and miss accidentally because it's just so voluminous.
No.
The jury instructions were many pages. The special verdict form was not. So simply anybody could have seen that. They didn't miss it. They were sending some kind of message. What that message is, I think we're about to find out.
We are. I'm holding up the verdict form. It's right here. It's just 2 questions, and you're right. You can't miss it. So we'll see if they go back, do their homework. And it may well be that the lawyers are aware at this point what the verdict is. So they had a brief moment with the judge in chambers. She may have briefly stated, hey, there's a problem with the verdict form. We're going to send them back. But she may have also indicated the result. So we will continue to watch that. We're going to come back on air as soon as the jury comes back with its decision. For now, that concludes our NBC News special report. More this evening on NBC Nightly News, tomorrow on Today. But don't turn away. We expect to have more from the jury any moment. I'm Savannah Guthrie. Thank you for watching.